If in the past, like me, you thought bookbinding was a painful, confusing process that required complicated tools and special skills, I'm about to set you free. You asked me to show you how to do this stitch, so I created this step-by-step guide on how I do it, and I included a little surprise too. Here we go, y'all. Well, hello and welcome to Pink Paper Peppermints. My name is Melissa and I am so glad you're here today. This is the cross stitch bookbinding stitch, and although it looks complicated, the way that I do it doesn't take expert skills. Now, granted, the way that I do it is a little rough around the edges. I'm not an artisan bookbinder, but if you don't mind a little rustic charm and you can punch holes and thread ribbon, you can do this. You know, artisans don't start out artisans. They start out not knowing, and they move to rough around the edges and then rustic charm, and slowly they become artisans after a lot of practice and trial and error. And I think most of us just want to be in the rustic charm zone. That's where I want to be. It's fun, it looks pretty, and who cares about the flaws? So don't compare your I don't know zone to someone else's artisan zone, okay? Let's stay in the rustic charm zone and have fun. So all you need for this are 4 or 5 basic supplies, most of which you probably already have. You need a tapestry needle with a wide eye. You need something to hold your paper down like paper clips or binder clips, something to punch holes with like a crocodile, or there are some bookbinding tools that you can use and I'll tell you about those, and some ribbon, twine, or thread, and also of course a book. So this is the book that I'm going to show you the technique on. This is a little mini junk journal that I made with a small junior elf book, kind of like a little golden book. And I have a tutorial on how to make this, so I'm not going to show you how to do that here, but I will link the tutorial in the description below. It's not difficult at all. And I wanted to make it a super simple way to start. So I want you to practice learning this before you get all complicated with extra stitches. So this is my favorite one that I've made because I just used 3 signatures. I did 2 rows of X's and I did all 3 signatures at the same time. So that's what I'm going to show you here because it goes so quick. Now, your little surprise is that I made you a little printable that you can print out that's just about the same size as this book that I'm using. It's a little bit smaller, but you will be able to practice this technique on it. And because it is paper and it's printable, you don't have to worry or stress if you mess up. Just print another one and try it again. It'll also be a lot easier for you to pull the ribbon or twine that you're using through the holes with paper just to practice. And I would say use something thinner like a thin twine while you're practicing. This kit has all of this in it, and I'll tell you how to get this at the end. It's got pages and papers, and it's also got a diagram that I'm going to tell you about in a little while. So to get started, the first part of my secret, which isn't really a secret, but it is extremely helpful, and that is having a template for your holes. So I have made you this template, and it will fit into your book, your practice book that I made you. And then you can also print it out again and use it in other books of the same size. So the first thing that I wanted to show you on our template is we're doing 3 signatures in this little book, and each column of holes is for a signature. So if you've got 3, you need 3 columns, and if you have 5 signatures, you're going to need 5 columns. Depending on how many signatures you have, that's how you know how many columns to do. And eventually you'll be able to make your own templates, but I don't want you to worry about that right now. I've got this one made for you, but I just wanted to show you that each one of these columns of holes is for our signatures. So the first thing that we want to do is punch the holes in our book cover, and we're going to use our template to show us where to punch those holes. And I like to use a paper clip on my template and just clip it to it and punch the holes right through the template, but you could also punch the holes in the template and then draw the holes onto your board and go straight into the board that way. So either way will work. Now I'm going to show you a couple of things that you can use. This is the We Are Makers is what they're called now. Crocodile punch, and I really like this. It will punch through almost anything, and it doesn't take a lot of hand strength to do that. But you can also use what's called a Japanese screw punch, and you can find these in a lot of different craft stores. I will link the one that I bought below, and it's a pretty easy thing to use, but if you already have a crocodile, that's easier. So I would go with that. If you don't have any of these tools and you are using your paper that I made you, your little paper book, you can just use a regular hole punch just to practice. And then if you enjoy it and you like it, then you want to invest in another tool, then you can do that. So I'm showing you here how you can put two settings. You have two settings on the crocodile. One is for a larger and one is for a smaller hole, and I'm using the smaller setting. And you're just going to line it up with your marks on your template and punch through. And if you want to be really precise, like I said, you can punch the holes first and then draw them in, and then your paper's not moving around. I like to just do it like this because it saves a step, and I like time-saving things. So you can see here, this is, my holes are already punched, and you might have a little fabric or cardboard from the book that you need to pull out, and you're just going to go then and do the rest of those. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is you want to put some kind of like a little arrow at the top of your template, just so that when you go to punch the holes in your signatures, you can be sure that those holes line up with the holes in your book. So you want the same hole that you used at the top of your book to be at the top of your signature. And I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. So we're going to punch our holes in our signatures now, and I just like to clip them together with some paper clips just so that they don't move around when I'm punching the holes. And I want to be sure and get the holes right in the center of that crease. Now, I will tell you, I often miss the center of that crease, and that's fine too. Usually you don't even see it. So I don't want you to stress too much about this, but if you want to and you want to make sure those holes are in that crease, one thing that I do is I use a friction pen, and this is it, and it is a heat erasable pen, which is really fun, and my friend Kathleen told me about these and I absolutely love them. And I will just mark it so that I can see it through the hole that I've already punched in my template and make sure that all three of those holes are lined up. It just makes it a little bit easier to make sure that they're lined up. And then I'm going to take my friction pen and draw the holes onto my paper in order to punch them. And again, I can use my heat tool then to erase these marks when I'm finished. So I'm working in my last signature, and when you're looking at this template, you're actually looking at it from left to right as if you were looking at the outside of the spine. So the first column is the back of the book. It's your last signature. And so I'm working in the last signature with that first column of holes, and I'm just going to mark these through the holes that we already punched, like we talked about. And then I'm going to do that with each signature. And then we're going to punch the holes in our signature just like we did in our book cover. And I'm just using that same hole punch, the We Are Makers Crocodile. And I want to show you another way that you can punch these holes, and that is using an old book and an awl. What you want to do is open it up to about the center, and you're going to use that crease in the book to put your signature in, and it's going to kind of cradle your signature. And there's actually a tool that you can buy called a bookbinding cradle, but I've found that this old book situation works just as well, and so that's what I use. And so you're just going to get your signature, and you're going to make sure it's right side up. You see I turn that over because a lot of times I will do it upside down. And then we're going to punch the holes in our signature using the awl. But before we do that, we do want to mark the holes using our template. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm using the friction pen that we used before, and I'm working in my second signature now. So now I'm using the second column of holes to mark those holes in this signature. And I'm just going to put my signature in the crease of the book, and I'm going to take my awl, and I'm just going to punch the hole down into the book through the signature. You can see that that takes a little extra elbow grease, which is why I like the We Are Makers Crocodile. So these are my three signatures, and I'm showing you here that I actually did punch a hole right in the front of one of them instead of in the crease, even though I was really trying hard. And I will show you later that that absolutely did not matter, so don't stress about it. Now I'm really excited to show you my secret sauce pattern for this stitch, and I created it to be kind of like a visual dot to dot pattern that's really easy to follow numerically. And I basically use something like this when I do it, a little sketch, but I made this one really pretty for you. And this helps so much because every time you go through one of the holes, well, okay, let me speak for myself. Every time I go through one of the holes, I will often forget where I am in the pattern. And so I have this visual sketch to remind me. So let me show you how it works. I designed it with a combination of colors and numbers that makes it super easy for you to remember the pattern. So you'll notice at the top it says signature 3, and we're going to be starting with our last signature. So when we're looking at the pattern, we're looking at the outside of the spine. And we have a key up in the top left that shows us that the bright pink lines are the outside spine stitch, and then the gray dark lines are the inside spine stitch. And then we're going to look at our numbers. We're going to start in signature 3 on the inside, and we're going to come out at hole number 1 and cross over to the second signature in hole number 2, and then we're going to go up to hole number 3 and come out and go down on the outside to hole number 4. Let me show you how that looks. So the dark pink thread is coming out from the inside of signature 3 and going into signature 2. The light pink line is inside signature 2 and it's coming out of hole number 3 and going down into signature number 1. Then the light pink line is inside signature 1 and coming out at that top hole. And then we're going to reverse it and go the opposite way. And you'll see in the middle there we're going to be doubling our thread. Now you don't have to start with the last signature. You could start with the first signature and go that way if you want to. The reason that I like to start with the last signature is because sometimes when you're getting warmed up, you make a mistake, and if it's at the back of the book, it doesn't show as much. And I think I got that philosophy from my grandmother when we would make pancakes at her house. She would always say the first ones are for the puppies because the first ones were always messed up, and that way they didn't go to waste. I didn't feel bad. The puppies enjoyed them, and I got to warm up in my pancake making skills. And the same thing goes for crafting. And I say that to myself a lot. The first ones are for the puppies. So I let myself get warmed up. If I make a mistake, it's okay. And so that is why I start with the third signature at the back of the book. Okay, so it's getting exciting now. We are ready to sew our signatures in. What we're going to do is paper clip the first signature that we're working with, which is the third signature. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Paper clip that to the back of the book. And I like to use my tapestry needle to just make sure the holes are all lined up. So I poke it through the signature and then through the cover, and I do that on all 3 holes and just make sure that everything's lined up properly. And then I clip it to the book. And then the next thing we're going to do is take signature number 2, and we're going to have it all paper clipped together as well, and we're going to line it up with that middle column of holes. And I'll do the same thing with my tapestry needle. I'll poke it through and make sure that it's lined up with all the holes, and once it is, I will clip it to that third signature. And so you can see that these 2 signatures are not connected to the front of the book or to that first signature. We're going to wait and do that until after we've done a couple of stitches. So I'm using seam binding to bind my book, and that's my favorite thing to use. I just love how it looks. It's definitely not what the professionals use. They use a waxed linen thread, which is a little easier to get in and out of the holes, but I just really like the way this looks, so this is what I use. So I go ahead and thread my needle, and typically I do 1 length of the book for each signature and then a little extra. And that turned out to not be enough, and you'll see how I handle that later. So it's probably always better to go a little bit longer than you think you'll need, but it can be fixed. If you end up running out of thread or ribbon in the middle, it can be fixed, and I'm going to show you how. Okay, so we have our diagram here, and I've got my book, and we are going to be starting in the third signature. In this top hole, we're going to be inside the signature. We're going to come out and go outside the spine into the second signature in that second middle hole. So I'm going inside that first hole. I'm going to turn my book up so that I can see. I see my needle. I'm going to poke it through and pull gently through. You don't want to go too fast because it can get tangled. And then on this first one, you want to leave about 3 to 5 inches of a tail to tie it off later. And I usually just paper clip it to my page. So we've just come out of the first hole at the top of signature 3, and now we're going to go down into the second hole in the middle of signature 2. So I'm going in on the outside spine. You can see there is my needle, and it's a little fiddly when you first do this because your book is not sewn in yet and it's just the paper clips holding it on, but just kind of persevere because after you get a couple stitches in, it'll be a lot easier. So I'm going to pull that through, and I'm going to tug really tight. Now, one of the things about this stitch, because we're going in and out of different signatures, you don't have as much opportunity to tighten up your thread or your ribbon. So as you poke through each hole, you want to just tighten it up as you can. You can go back and fix it, but it is very difficult. So we've just gone into this middle hole in signature 2, and now we're inside the signature and we're going to go straight up to the top hole. So you can see here we've come in that middle hole, we're going up and into that top hole of signature 2. And then I'm just going to push my pages back so I can see as I poke that needle through the hole. And you can see in that middle hole, see how my ribbon is getting a little loose down there? So you just want to keep an eye on that. And as I said before, as you're sewing and tightening, after a while, it won't be a problem anymore because it will be holding itself in. But in the beginning, you just want to keep that tension as you go through each hole. So now I'm coming out the top, and again pulling gently, not too fast, and making sure that my stitch is really tight there. So we've just come out of signature number 2 in hole number 3, and number 3 is pointing down to number 4, which is going to be in our 3rd signature. So we're going to cross on the outside over to our 3rd, which is really our 1st signature in the book. So it's time to go ahead and grab that 1st signature, and we're going to paper clip it in. And you can see that I'm still needing to keep my ribbon pulled tight, but I'm going to grab my 3rd signature, which is actually the 1st signature of the book, and I'm going to attach it to the cover to keep it still as we're stitching. So now we're going to go into that middle hole in the 1st signature, and I'm going to take the paper clips off of my signature now so I can see where the needle is coming through, and I'll put those back on in just a minute. So there's my needle. I'm going to pull that ribbon through, and then I want to go into the middle hole of the 1st signature. It's not tied down, so I'm just going to pull it up so I can get that ribbon pulled through, and then I'll clip it back. So now we're in that 1st hole, we're inside the 1st signature, we're going to go up to the 1st hole of signature 1. Here we are coming out of that top signature, and then we're going to cross over and go down to the 2nd signature, and it's going to be hole number 6, 2nd signature, middle hole, and now we're actually forming our 1st cross stitch. We're going to pull that through, and you can see here I can't see my needle, so I think it's okay to go ahead and take the paper clips off now. I think we've got enough tension there to hold those signatures in place, and then I can see my needle poking through there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that ribbon through and give it a tug, tighten it up, and then we're going to go into the middle hole of signature 2, the middle signature. Just going to flip that over, and you'll see that we're going to start overlapping some of our thread now because we're going back the same way that we came. So we're going to pull that through and give it a quick tug, and when we flip it over, you'll see we've completed our 1st cross stitch. So we've got all 3 signatures have stitches in them now. Now we're inside signature 2, and we're going to go straight up to that top hole of signature 2. So I'm going to make sure it's tight. I'm going to go through the top signature and pull through, and I'm going to be ready to do my 2nd cross stitch, and that's going to be from the top of signature 2 outside. We're going to cross over and go into the middle hole of signature 3, which is the 1st signature of our book. So we're going to come out of the middle hole of that 1st signature of our book, and we're starting on the outside of the spine, coming through that middle hole, pulling really tight as we go. Remember, each hole you want to pull really tight, and now we're ready to go down inside that 1st signature to the bottom hole. So we're going to do that next. We're going to go through that bottom hole, pull really tight, and then we're going to make our 1st cross stitch on the bottom row. So we're going into the middle hole of our 2nd signature, and we've already got some ribbon there, so we're going to have to pull extra tight. And then we're going to go down straight in that signature to come out on the bottom hole. Now, it's right about here that I start to realize that I'm probably not going to have enough ribbon to finish this, but I don't want to do my solution while the ribbon is outside of the book. I'd rather do it on the inside so that it's hidden. So I go ahead and do my best to finish that last stitch, which is the bottom of the second signature up to the middle hole of the third signature. And I go ahead and just pull that through even though I've just got this tiny little piece. And what I'm going to do is tie a square knot, and I want it to end up on the inside of my book here. I don't want to have to pull it through the hole. So I cut a little bit of it off just so that I could make it a little bit shorter and tie my knot. And now my knot is going to be right inside and it won't even be noticeable. So if you run out of ribbon, don't worry, it's easily fixable. So now we're going to go down inside that signature, come out on the bottom hole, and we're going to start our path back to the front of this row, and we're going to almost be finished. So we're going to pull that through, make sure to keep pulling tight. We're going to go up to that middle hole and down through into that middle signature. And you notice that we've sewn all three signatures at once, and it's been really fast. It feels a lot slower when I have to stop and explain each step, but when you're doing it, it really goes really fast. I can usually do one of these in about an hour. So we're going to pull that through on that bottom hole, and we're going to do our very last cross stitch. It's going to go up and to the top to that middle hole, hole number 16. We're going to go down inside that hole and come out in the last signature, and that is going to be where we're going to tie our ends. You remember we had that end paper clipped at the beginning, so now we have this end to tie it in the center. And then you can leave those tails long. You could tie some beads on the end or buttons, or you could cut them off short, however you prefer to have them. I like to leave mine long. And then our book is finished. And one more thing that I need to tell you is how to get this kit so that you can practice. So I have the book, the pages, and your special dot-to-dot diagram and everything in a kit for you. You're just going to go to my website at pinkpaperpeppermints.com/scraps, and there you'll be able to enter your email address so that I can email you the kit right away. And that's not all. If you want to do this binding, then you need to know how to make this beautiful book. And so I'm going to put the link in the description of the video that I made you to create a book just like this one. Have a week filled with peace and grace, and I will see you next time here on Pink Paper Peppermints.